All right, here we go. All right, welcome to another edition of Tigers SRD, but this is the MCB Roundtable. This is version, 5, Uper? Is that right?
I think that's close.
Yeah.
We'll call it 5.
We'll call it 5. There we go. I'm Rogelio. Alongside me is my assembled crew. A couple first-timers. Colin, you've been on a podcast before, right?
I have. I was part of the last round, yep.
That's right. And then I know it's new, Joe, have you been on a podcast before?
I've not. First-timer.
The first timer. Okay, awesome.
Yep.
So Joe, by the way, comes over from us via a great site over the same time the site that Chris came from, Tigstown. So welcome aboard, Joe. Just wanted to formally introduce you to everybody out there. And of course, another third appearance, the fifth appearance for both Jake and Uper on the roundtable. So we're going to break down the top 20 tonight, our top 20 list. We're going to go we have some questions from the audience as well. And hopefully we might have another guest join us too as well. So this is the most we've ever this is kind of a lot of juggling here, but I will be playing host and we'll go back and forth. But some breaking news from the Tigers. They signed we were talking beforehand, the big signing of Willie Peralta to a minor league deal. He's going to get an invite to camp and a bullpen arm to throw out there, I guess, for competition.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing this year is everybody's going to need innings from somewhere. So this is just a depth signing, I think, for, if anything, just for Toledo. But who knows? Maybe he'll come up at some point.
Yeah, it's hard to be too disappointed about these, minor league signings to add some depth, especially at, what in baseball terms amounts to peanuts. It's, tough to be too disappointed about a signing like that.
Yeah, I mean, we can all joke about the sarcasm about it, but it is kind of. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, no, I mean, we talk about them. We want them to add pitching. They're talking about adding pitching. We keep pining for like Taiwan Walker, Rick Porcello, or somebody, Dakota Rizzi, something like that. And you get whatever Kashao from the former Yankees prospect.
Oh yeah, that's right. The guy who's built like a linebacker.
His name sounds like some sort of onomatopoeia.
Fall show.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a top 30 prospect at one point for the Yankees, but I wasn't familiar with him.
Neither was I.
Yeah, but I mean, it fits the description of what AJ Hinch wants to do, which is give relievers multiple innings. We'll get to that, to some of the comments that are going on in spring training. Let's start with the top 20 list, the top 20 prospects. And for us, this was in terms of decision making and what have you, I think the 10 through 20 was kind of, I'll have the list up here. Originally, it was kind of, when we first looked at it, the people who got votes, the ones who were just left out, Cody Clemens, Wentzil Perez, and looks like the other one was Santana. But we didn't really, in terms of the 10 through 20, there wasn't really consistency with it. Was there? Was there, Chris? I didn't see anything that seemed like it was universal across the board.
Well, I just found it kind of interesting because we all only did our top 20s, and we still got really close to all being like consensus. There were only 3 guys who were kind of off the board, really, and there were only 2 or 3 that weren't on all 5, I think. So, yeah, it was a pretty. I mean, the orders are just different, but none of them are like crazy off. I don't think. There are a couple outliers. I tried to outline the ones where some of us were the high man and the low man. The high man being red, the low man being black. And yeah, you see it. It's me, you, and Uper. I think that got a little crazy at times.
Got to shake it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kellen, I was going to ask for your thoughts too, because you're a big prospect guy, and in terms of even when you were coming out with the top 20, how was it on your end to kind of come up with the order?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're really breaking this down, I mean, at the back end of the top 20 here, you have a lot of projectable guys that we haven't really seen much, right? So you have your Campos, your Colt Keith, you could include Workman in there, De La Cruz, Adenso Reyes. All those guys are, we know them for what their body is right now. They have a lot of projectability on their frames. Keith De La Cruz and Reyes especially have a lot of, power potential. But a lot of those guys we haven't really seen much from, either because they were just drafted or because they haven't really came over stateside yet. So I think that was kind of the case in that tier. And as you got up the list a little bit here, you started to see players, like Meadows, Daz Cameron, that are, I guess, more veterans in the system that we have at least some sample size here to go off of. So I think more of a challenge down at the bottom tier there, kind of separating those guys just because the sample size is so small.
Yeah, I would agree with that because especially with Anselm Reyes and even Campos. I mean, Campos has been last seen since he was 14. When he was 14 years old for the Cuban junior national team, if I'm not mistaken. But Jake, in terms of even for you, I mean, you've been working on prospects list left and right for left with myself over at Prospects Live. Same thing, the same question. I mean, in terms of making that 10 to 20 decision, was it easy? A lot of no-brainers for you?
No, it wasn't any no-brainers really. You kind of had to, because you look at that bucket. I mean, it's Cabrera was just drafted. Meadows has struggled. Perez has been injured quite a bit. Faedo just had Tommy John. Rogers, we don't know what to make of because he was, I don't want to say demoted, but he was never really brought up to begin with. Packard, kind of everybody's high on, but he's switching to a new position. Workman was just drafted. Like, you can find a flaw in each of these guys, whether it's just lack of eyes or injury or performance. So no, it wasn't an easy task at all to get 10 through 20 together at all. And you can see I was a low man on De La Cruz, but again, I mean, that's 19. I think we had him ranked 17. So
Yeah.
It's not that far off. So
Yeah, I mean, I was joking that Jake and Kellen were basically like dead nuts on what ended up in our average. It was just like literally almost perfect, spot on. So yeah, I mean, if you want to judge the accuracy of lists, those might be the ones. I think some of the stuff, if people are looking at it, they might be a little bit curious about the decisions that the rest of us made, particularly up top. So I don't know if we want to. I think all five of us basically had the same top five, except Rogelio. I think you had Paredes fifth instead of Manning sixth. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I went because based off the fact that I've seen more of Paredes than Manning, because one of the things that's been getting in my brain more is how much do I see the other but I have to get out of the mindset and James Shipman has told me this, and you as well, kind of the overall arc of where the prospect's going to be. So that's what I have to still get that mindset of, I always say, well, I have to see it. I have to see them. And I've seen Manning only once in person. So that was where my mindset was coming from that.
Yeah. And I think basically all of these are defensible and there's no, we're not going to be shaming anybody, but I imagine some people would be curious why I had Torkelson third and Skubal second. I was the only one to do either of those. I was the high on Skubal and low on Torkelson. I don't know if other people were like, what are you doing? But for me, a lot of it, I'll say, and this is the same reason I'm the only one who didn't have Bryant Packard on the list. And I like Bryant Packard a lot, but a lot of this comes down to position, basically defensive position, and the demands from that position to even be an average player. And that's why I have Torkelson third rather than first or second. Is I'm not convinced he's going to play third base. Maybe we'll see. Maybe he'll go out and prove me wrong this year. And that's all these lists are just a snapshot in time. I can change my mind in a month if I see Torkelson look really good. But basically, the idea is that I kind of just this all by picturing their eventual war in my head, what these players are going to provide. And to become even like a 4-WAR player at first base, you have to just go absolutely nuts. You have to hit 30 home runs and hit 300 and walk 10-12%. And it's very possible Torkelson does that, but I just feel like that's still going to be the upper end of what he does. I'm not convinced he's going to be like this superhuman power hitter. I feel like he's going to be more like a 25 to 35 home run guy than a 40 plus. And I think we've compared him before. I kind of joked that he might be Castellanos with more walks, which is still a good player. But I'm just a little bit wary right now. That's why I have him third.
So, Chris, that kind of begs the question then, like, what do you see from Skubal? Do you see a top of the rotation starter?
I think I see somewhere between a 3 and a 2. And it's tough. Again, we're going off small samples, and part of this is just like, hey, Torkelson, we didn't get to see him play against big league competition, and we did get to see Skubal. And Skubal wasn't great, but there were some underlying things in his performance that I think are really promising. And you'll see him, he gets knocked. I think ESPN and Fangraphs both pointed out that, he throws so many fastballs, and very few other successful pitchers do that. But he still missed a ton of bats, major league bats, with his fastball last year. He got hit gave him home runs on him too. But it's just sort of the strikeout rate. I think, it was small samples, but it would have been like top 20, top 25 among all pitchers in baseball last year. And same with the swing and miss. I think I feel like even though that fastball might be, might be throwing it too much, and it might be, get him in trouble occasionally, I think it's going to be a legit plus pitch for him in the major league level. And from there, I feel like, if your main pitch can miss bats and when hitters know it's coming, then I think that's kind of the limit for you. I mean, you still have to find other pitches, and I think he's got the potential with his the slider at least. And his changeup appears to be kind of, at least from last year, it looked more like a straight changeup. Like, it didn't seem to fade at all. But I think given what he has, like the baseline of knowing that he could strike guys out with his best pitch, I think there's a lot of room for growth there, and I could see a potential number 2 starter. And even if nothing works out, I could see a super reliever in the realm of Josh Hader, who might put up 3 WAR per year just as a reliever. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Just kind of, I'm picturing in my head, I've got Torkelson as like a 3 WAR player every year, and Skubal like 3 to 4, and Green 4 plus. Not to bore everybody.
Oh, no, sorry. I was considering anybody else wanted to chime in after that, but as far as like in terms of Skubal, I know that there's a lot of, I don't know if you guys have heard this or not, but it's kind of like the idea because of his delivery, there is some sort of injury risk. Do you guys believe any of that? I'll start with you, Joe. I mean, do you believe in, if you could base off his delivery, or that's just kind of like one of those, like, it's going to happen because he already had Tommy John. So I was just kind of curious what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see anything that tells me that he's going to be a greater risk than any pitching, than any pitching prospect who's out there. I even think he's helped by the fact that he does use that fastball, such a high percentage of the time. I think tends to tell me that there may be some there could be some durability there. So, no, I don't think he's a player that, I'm necessarily concerned that he's a greater injury risk than, the old, there's no such thing as a pitching prospect adage, that people throw out there because, they just inherently have more risk than position players because they get injured more often.
Anybody else?
No, that's where I would be going with it too. I think I was low on Skubal. I had him at 5, but you're splitting hairs with him and Manning. But I had Manning 4 and Skubal 5 behind Torkelson and Green, primarily because they're pitchers and pitchers break down. But that's not to say that his delivery, his mechanics are making him injury prone. Number one, I don't think I'm 100% qualified to have an opinion on that. But 2, so many pitchers get hurt, and there's no telltale reason why half the time. Justin Verlander was healthy for 20 years, and all of a sudden he broke down last year. I don't think his mechanics changed. Maybe it wore out. Who knows? But it finally let go, and that could happen to any of these guys. Like when you look at Mize, one of the reasons I know I ranked him number 2, but I still have some trepidation about him because he's had that injury background in high school and in college. He hasn't had the massive breakdown yet, but he's always been on the precipice, it sounds like. So we'll just have to see where that goes. But that's just the way of doing business with pitchers. They could break down. So I'm not too worried about Skubal in that respect. I love the Josh Hader comparison. That's kind of where I was going as well. Hopefully he's a starter. We'd rather have that. But if he is only a super reliever, take the word only out of it, because the way the game is moving, that is a weapon. And the Tigers are going to need more and more weapons of any variety right now, because right now they don't have very many at all. So if that's what he turns out to be, that'd be fantastic.
And as far as the top, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just circling back on his 2020 performance real quick too. Like, I know Chris mentioned that Fangraphs and some of the other scouting outlets out there kind of dinged him for his fastball usage, but I saw that as a positive. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think he threw that fastball about 70% of the time, right? And I think it was a positive sign that he didn't just get crushed, throwing the fastball that much. And obviously, he's probably going to be a little bit more homer prone than you'd like, just with throwing that pitch that much. But just taking a look at his secondaries when he did throw them, I mean, he got a swing and miss rate in the changeup of 32%, the curveball 44%, and the slider above 25% as well. So, when he did throw those, he still missed bats. He still got swing and miss. So, if Chris Fetter comes in, if he's able to change his pitch mix a little bit to include, that slider and that changeup a little bit more, maybe he will miss bats and, limit the hits and the homers a little bit there. So I was actually encouraged by what he did last year.
Especially with that fastball, some of the numbers you're mentioning earlier, the whiff percentage is at 28%. And I mean, you're right. He did allow a lot of home runs with that pitch, but to get an XBA of 203, I mean, that's pretty good.
Well, and that's the thing I think about I think his delivery helps him a lot. He's got all all the traits that modern pitching, design or designers want. He's got a really high spin on the fastball. He's got a great vertical angle, and he hides the ball well. So yeah, I just think it's probably the single best pitch among all these pitching prospects. And nobody could survive in one pitch except for Mariano Rivera. But as Colin was saying, there's more to him there. And I don't know. I think he's got a little bit higher ceiling than than most people recognize. But I think, as you were saying, we're really splitting hairs with all these guys. These are 5 legit top 50 prospects. We've talked about it a lot on the site and podcast before. I mean, your mileage may vary by how and where you rank the guys.
And what about you, Jake? I mean, in terms of just where you stand with the top 5, because there's the Fangraphs too, where, for example, Riley Green's 38th, and there's other, you and Kellen Bofer have been examining the lists closely. So, what about you, Jake?
Yeah, we could be maybe the hot take machine as it pertains to Riley Green as the best prospect in the Tiger system, and that's fine, I guess. But you really are splitting hairs with these top 5. MLB Pipeline has all 5 in the top 25 overall in baseball. Mm-hmm. So really, you could put these in any order and pretty well justify why they deserve to be in the spot that they are. For me personally, just looking at mine, I went Torkelson Green, and then I went Skubal Manning, and I really just favored position player talent.
Mm-hmm.
Like Torkelson's bat a lot. I think he's gonna walk. I think he's gonna get home runs. I see Torkelson as the Mark Teixeira type of production, and I see Green more in the Nick Markakis type production. Not anything against him. That's a fine outcome for a player like that. But that's just kind of how I envisioned them. And then Skubal, I felt like I had to plead my case in the article, because I wrote up Skubal in the countdown and just kind of explain where we were coming from with this. And we kind of talked ad nauseum about it in our Slack chat. About Skubal versus Mize and pros and cons and things. And I personally have some concerns with injury with Mize. I know he's a hard worker. I know he's up, as far as I know, on all of the pitch design and analytics and things like that. I think he's going to be fine ultimately, but it's just a funky motion and it's very odd. And I know the splitter, and that might be old school. I don't know what the jury is on that, but I know that has been linked to arm injuries in the past. At times in 2020, he seemed to just plain abandon pitches, whether it was the fastball and he would go to the cutter or vice versa. It just seemed like he didn't quite have everything going. Maybe it comes together for him in 2021. I don't know. but it just felt more appropriate to have Skubal ahead of Mize. And then Manning, I mean, again, it's not a knock on Manning or anything like that. These are fine prospects we have in the top 5. But just for me, he's got some things that he's working on. He adjusted his arm path. He actually spoke tonight on an interview on the radio with 97.1 The Ticket and talked about how he shortened his arm path. He's got a new breaking ball. So he's kind of working on some things. And again, I think Manning will be fine as well. I like his makeup, his body, his work ethic. But that was just kind of my rationale behind the top 5.
As far as, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just say, I think we may have buried the lead, but yeah, we have Riley Green ranked number 1 in the system, which is, I think, unique among any and all prospect makers for the Tigers. We basically three of us put him first in the system. And as you said, Mize and Skubal ended up being tied, by the mathematical way we did it, and we kind of gave the edge to Skubal, I think, because 3 of us had him higher. It was basically a coin flip. But I don't know. I've done too much talking. I don't know, Kellen. I'm curious what your reasoning for putting Green first overall was.
Yeah, I think that we might be a little bit biased from the recency factor here of seeing him go out in spring training last year and just seemingly dominate major league talent out there. I think what it comes down to me is that he just seems to have that it factor. And, he seems like he wants to be there in the high pressure situations. He seems like a guy that's going to, really enjoy, putting this rebuild on his back and just like carrying this team forward. And I think to me, it's that attitude and that factor. And, again, this could be somewhat anecdotal, but it just seems in times that I've watched him and in the results we've seen from spring training and just the character and the attitude I've seen from him, that he's going to be that it factor that pushes this thing forward. And, that's why I have him first overall, I'd say.
Well, and Kellen, I think that's, a really good point. And when you watch Riley Green play, I think there's a maturity to his game that really belies his age. That swing is relatively well refined for a kid who's played how many games out of high school at this point in his career, And so when you see a player like that, I think, I'm sure if you went back and studied guys that, that had that type of maturity, out of high school and, that ability to, control the strike zone and adapt to pitches at a young age. I mean, I think that is usually a sign that you have a player who's going to develop pretty quickly, pretty rapidly and can have success at the upper levels of the minors. And then hopefully, if you're a Tigers fan, hopefully at that major league level as well.
He just seems like the type of guy that really enjoys like proving people wrong. And when he came out of high school, right, he was kind of out of shape. He was, everybody said he can't run fast, so he went out and now he can run way faster. And then they said, well, he can't play center field. Well, he went out and he made like 3 amazing catches in center field. And it's like, he's obviously gotten stronger, taking care of his body. He even has some projection left on his body, I think. And he just seems like the type of guy that just, really wants it and wants to go out there and prove people wrong.
I'm just wondering if he's going to be, in my mind, I had him number 3, which is, I still think pretty high and pretty good. I might have been the low person on him. I get in my mind, is he going to be the player that Boston thought Andrew Benintendi was going to be? Not the guy he ended up being, but the guy that he was kind of hyped into a few years ago. If he can get to that level, I mean, then we got a really good center fielder right there who's going to hit, 20 to 25 home runs and, be an offensive force in a lot of ways. Benintendi came up short of that so far.
Yeah, for me, it was when I saw him at West Michigan with Chris, where we saw the adjustments he was making at the plate, and he, even in center field, he was kind of like, he was out there kind of almost like he was on the prowl a little bit, and I thought he was quicker than we thought when we saw him in center field, and I thought he played a pretty good glove out there. But even you're going up against college guys, and this is at the time low A, and I thought that I thought he looked good. I thought he was holding his own, considering that he was just in Connecticut, 2 weeks before that, Chris? Something like that?
Yeah, he played 9 games in the Gulf Coast League and then about a month in the New York Penn League, and then came up to low A West Michigan. And we told him at the time that was the first time that the Tigers had brought up a high schooler to full season A ball in his first pro year since 1994. He just, I don't know. You guys have all pretty much covered it. I basically, in my head, I think his offensive ceiling is about the same as Spencer Torkelson's. I think he's got a chance to hit 30 home runs a year in his prime, hit 300 a time or two, and do it while he's playing a slightly more valuable defensive position. I don't think for field, but I think he can be a solid right fielder or left fielder, and that's kind of what edged him ahead for me. I don't know. I mean, I feel like sort of globally, he's being placed slightly lower just because everybody's hedging their bets about him because he hasn't faced much competition, and that's fine. And I may be overreacting to the small samples that we saw in spring training and in summer camp, but he just looked so advanced to me that I was comfortable up the top of my list.
Yeah, I mean, in considering that for how many prospects we've seen come through here in the last, I mean, I can go back some ways, but watching some closely, Riley Green, to me, is just something for his age to be that kind of advancement throughout the Tiger system. It stands out because you look at some of the younger talent that's come through. I mean, you saw Winfield Perez, who didn't make our list, that kind of regressed a little bit. I mean, he looked like he was on his way up, and then he just kind of fell back a little bit. So for his age to be doing what he was doing, and I don't know, it's just it wasn't, again, it's not against tough or not against the really bad competition either. And to go out in the low A like that, I don't know, that to me just stood out because I don't remember a Tiger positional player that has done that. Or, you're supposed to go from college to low A and dominate, and we didn't see that, unfortunately, with Nick Quintana, who struggled. But we did see that with Riley Green.
He's not enough.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, kind of maybe last point on Green is I think we frequently talk about, when we talk about prospects, a lot of times, obviously, we look at a player's ceiling. But I think Green's that high school player whose floor is actually, relatively high as well. I mean, when you have a hit tool like he does, I mean, that lets you get to some of these ancillary skills, that he has. I mean, he's got certainly not Torkelson's raw power, obviously, but there's power there. And I feel like because of his hit tool, he's going to be able to use that. He's going to be able to use that power. I mean, he's going to be able to, probably play decent defense, even if it's on an outfield corner someday. And that to me is a pretty positive sign that we're talking about a high school kid who can hit the ball. Probably is going to be able to drive his way up the ladder doing that. And I mean, I love the high ceiling and stuff like that with a lot of these guys, but I love the fact too that Green's got a pretty high floor.
Yeah, I feel comfortable there. I feel comfortable with number one, and I mean, it was some people were shocked that we had Torkelson too, but hey,
blame me because he probably would have been one if I hadn't ranked Torkelson 3. But I guess gotta have something to talk about, right?
No, yeah, I mean, and this is the first time Motor City Bengals has ever done a top 20, so I think this is a good way to that. And I know Bless You Boys has their top 30 out right now, so if you want to check that out. So much better than us.
Do 10 more now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do we want to on the next 5 at all? That's kind of to me. That's kind of the most interesting part of the system. Not the best part or the most exciting, but just where to line up that second tier of prospect, because the second tier is pretty thin, in my opinion, and then you get like this really big third tier.
Yeah, I mean, there's in terms of even, I know that look, it sounds like I'm letting out a hot air balloon when I say this, and I'm not trying to doubt the Tigers, and we should definitely, for sure, give them his due. I mean, the Tigers definitely deserve their due, but it's still a system that's very, very top heavy, and the second tier. This is where, in terms of for next year, for example, you got Chris. You mentioned these 2 names earlier there on Fangraphs. Set that up for us, because when you said those names earlier in the chat, that was something that just a little eyebrow raising.
Fangraphs released the prospects of Fangraphs, and they do a fantastic job. Lange and now Kevin Goldstein was our guest last week, right? I don't know.
Yeah, last week.
They did the top 100, which is actually like 130 names, and then today they had their pick like for next year, guys who might make the top 100 list next year. And part of this is, they say they can't do guys that they've used before. So somebody that he picked last year, he can't try him again.
Yeah.
But they're always trying. Part of what I like about Fangraphs is they're always trying to kind of update their process and figure out what major league teams are actually valuing. And I think they're putting more value on relievers now because the value of relievers has gone up in major league games in whole. We've seen starters are pitching fewer and fewer innings, relievers are pitching more multi-inning appearances and stuff. So they had 2 relievers with bigger guys in their pick split next year. One of them was Zach Hess, who we've also had on the show before. And the other one was Will Vest, who the Tigers lost in the Rule 5 draft to Seattle, I believe.
That's correct, yeah.
And both of those seemed strike me. And we were talking about this. Jake and I were saying it's just really odd to see any relievers a top 100 prospect list or projected to be a top 100 prospect. But I can sort of see the thought process in that, like I said, the relievers are becoming more and more valuable, and they're just trying to reflect the value within the sport rather than, I guess, traditionally on the prospect list.
Yeah, in my mind, it's curious in the sense that, I would be shocked if Zach Hess was cracking any top 100 list at this time next year, right?
I would be, yeah, me too.
But I think in the sense that, there'll be a decent major league reliever as a floor. I mean, I think that's a pretty safe bet for a guy like Hess. He throws in the upper 90s, decent breaking ball. I mean, the same thing with Vest as well. So I think it's a pretty safe bet to say, this guy is a guy that could be in the back end of a bullpen come 2 or 3 years down the road. So if that's what they're going for there, then that makes sense in my mind.
Now the argument against that is the most effective relievers usually are failed
starters, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if they're already a starter in the minors, then the likelihood that they're going to come out and be an effective late inning, high leverage go-to guy, it's not unheard of, but it's unlikely.
I would say what I think they're trying here, because we've seen over the last few years, every now and then there will be a reliever who kind of pops from out of nowhere, like Emilio Pagan, I think of.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a guy in the Reyes system, came up as a reliever, put up a 1.5 WAR season.
Right.
A couple years ago.
Williams last year.
Oh, the Rays.
Yeah. He was in the Rays, and they got traded to the Padres, right? Yeah. And then he wasn't very good this year.
You look at what the Rays have done every year. I mean, they come up with Alvarado, and he has a good year and a half. He kind of flames. Yeah. Then they move on to the next guy, and they bring in Fairbanks. Or they give a guy with a funky delivery like Curtis a chance, and he posts a 1.10 ERA, and they trade him. So,
and that's
these guys they're out there. They can be found.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt. That's the way they had a category called "Looks Weird, but Stuff is Good," basically, and that's I think they're doing. They're trying to find the next version of this guy who doesn't seem like a traditional prospect, and then suddenly comes up and produces at the major league level. And they've got a bucket of 8 or 9 guys. I think Hess qualifies as one of them, like a guy with funky stuff who could come up and do some damage. And I kind of appreciate that approach. They're saying this is the type of guy who does this. Well, the odds of actually being Zach Hess seem really low, but who knows? I mean, it's kind of a proof of concept, I think.
Well, and the fun thing is, he could be that kind of guy, but a lot of times they're 27 years old in their third organization when it happens.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So, I don't know. It was an interesting aspect. I mean, it's like I said, it's fun to talk about when you try something different. I don't necessarily agree with it, but
no.
Here it is.
I don't either. And think of the volatility, too. I mean, a guy like Trevor Rosenthal was on the Detroit Tigers. I mean, that fact alone tells you all that you need to know about Trevor Rosenthal. And turns around and signs a 1-year, $11 million deal. And it's like, man, they're just so volatile and anything can change year to year.
Yeah.
And it could be one simple thing that can change. For example, I always think about what the Rays did with Fernando Rodney. They had him go to the third side of the rubber. Same thing with Drew Smiley, and they became both completely different pitchers. And so, I mean, maybe there was something with Zach Hessler. We had him on the podcast, and he's got a pretty good work ethic and what have you. But it's just, I don't know. It's the same thing when people get excited about, and I've learned my lesson about this. For example, Jason Foley, like he throws a fastball 100 miles an hour, great, but he throws it straight. And so I mean, or Zach, or Zach Houston, for example. No knock on Zach Houston or anything, but Zach. Everybody got excited about Zach Houston because he was blowing people away, and what have you. And and he got up to the higher levels and started walking people. So because of his delivery, but I don't know. The ex-starter thing is where I think I take more credence in the fact that if a guy who was starting in the minor leagues becomes a reliever, a high leverage reliever, that might be the case, because it seems like what AJ Hinch keeps talking about today is multiple innings. And the Tigers, I don't know if they're geared towards that right now. And that's kind of like leads to my next question is, who in camp right now? I mean, Gregory Soto used to be a starter. We saw that he's now is going to be a reliever, but is there anybody really in camp right now that's going to be they're talking about the AJ Hinch actually said something that a lot of fans appreciated today. He was talking about the role about the closer, and that's going to be a little different. It's not going to be the typical one inning. It's not going to be this is my guy, and he seemed like he had some choices, but who'd you go to first to close games right now if you're the Tigers?
I think Jose Cisnero probably fits the role most closely. But again, we're talking about volatile relievers. He was a nobody like 2-3 years ago, and then he was possibly their best reliever last year. He got the most traditional closer look to me, like a mid-90s fastball and a sharp slider. But I like Soto too. He just doesn't throw quite enough strikes.
Yeah, we have to think of like what closer is going to mean, because Hinch alluded to it, right? As you talked about, he's not always going to be pitching the ninth inning. So if it's a fireman role that Hinch is planning to deploy and just call it closer, just as a term, I guess, or a definition, Soto would be my guy for something like that.
What about you, Joe?
Yeah, I think Soto makes a lot of sense. I think, Brian Garcia was relatively effective in a small sample last year, and I don't know if don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I feel like he wasn't missing quite as many bats as people thought he may. When he was in the minors. So generally speaking, you'd like to see somebody who can throw the ball by somebody a little bit more. But I think Soto's probably if it were me, the guy that I'd throw out there at the beginning of the day in those highest leverage innings. And if you're a fan, he's probably the most fun guy to watch out of those guys as well. So,
what about you, Uper?
Well, I think I look at I could always start off almost every answer by looking at the Rays because I watch a lot of Rays baseball. I think last year in the 60-game season plus the playoffs, they had 14 guys get a save over the course of that short season. It was 13 or 14. It was a high number. I like that approach, to be honest. I've been talking about that for years. And I think the Tigers are in a place where they can experiment and go down that road and use a lot of different guys, because they have a lot of guys who, as you guys just mentioned, 4 or 5 different guys who have some things that you like, but none of them are perfect for the role. I think you could throw Jimenez into that mix, even though he's gotten his chances and never really hung on to anything. But there's no reason not to give him another try. I would like to see them just use whoever's matches up best that night, get into that mindset, make that the way they're going to run their bullpen. And I don't think they need to rely on any one player. I do like Brian Garcia. I always have, back from when he was in college. I would love to see him grow into that role. I don't know if he might be just a little short on the stuff to do it. Maybe he's more of a mid-inning guy. But I think given that the team has relatively low to non-existent expectations, they can be aggressive in how they use their bullpen, try to figure out different formulas and put guys in different roles and see what shakes out.
And one of the things about this bullpen last year wasn't that, I mean, comparatively speaking to the last year, it wasn't that bad. They were in the middle of the pack. They were ahead for a FIP of 4.83, and they were just under one WAR. Now, it doesn't sound like I'm praising them a lot, and I'm just saying, but they're in the middle of the pack, considerably where the starters were. I mean, they had to go a lot to the start. Or the bullpen was used quite a bit last year, and I'm always kind of curious to see, kind of thinking to myself, well, if the starters went a little deeper in games, I think the bullpen would be a little better. But it was just they were getting taxed out there a little bit in even the shortened season. But I thought, all things considering what was going on, we saw the emergence of Soto. But I mean, Brian Garcia, you guys mentioned it a little bit. He doesn't have the strikeout numbers to make him a closer, but the Tigers kept putting him out there as like they were trying to try him out for the closer role. But you look at anybody on this roster right now, hell, you can even have Buck Farmer or Tyler Alexander go a couple innings for a save if they wanted to, and just kind of go with the hot hand.
No question.
Jim Leyland did that. Jim Leyland, when he was in Pittsburgh, when he was the manager in Pittsburgh, he had a bullpen by committee with Stan Belinda, Bob Walk. Some of these names that some of you, Kellen and Jake, might look at me like I'm who.
Did
But,
you have
I mean,
Helio Guante?
yeah, there you go. There's another one. Yeah, see Joe. Okay, so Joe, Joe's closer to the same age as me, so I think he would probably remember those names as well. But yeah, without giving age up. But it's like it's one of those things where the bullpen by committee thing, comparatively speaking to Brad Osmus, who got vilified, and rightfully so, because he was like, "This is my man, and I'm not going to nope, it's my guy." And so,
I'm really interested to see how some of those middle innings will play out, and specifically like what type of role Daniel Norris has coming up this year, because I always thought I was pretty high on him as a prospect, thought he'd be a pretty good starter. But I'm really fascinated to see him more in a middle multiple innings role, even try him as a piggyback starter role like they tried in 2019 there for a little bit. I'm really interested to see how they do with some of those guys. I mean, even some of those those non-roster invitees like Derek Holland and Ramirez and stuff. I mean, those are guys who can pitch multiple innings out of a bullpen, and I'm kind of interested to see how Hinch is going to piece together the middle of that bullpen.
yeah, because there's so many you look at some of the non-roster invitees in camp too. One of the things that we talked about Peralta earlier is potentially getting a shot too, but you have Derek Holland, who's going to be kind of possibly down the middle relief too, and who's going to come up from the minors right now. What I concern myself with in terms of relief help down in the minors is I look down there and you have Orismo Ramirez, who they got from New York. Logan Shore is going to be also a possibility. I know he's listed as a starter, but he could be a name that could go as a bullpen guy. But other than that, I mean, mentioned Zach Hass earlier. I mean, the likes of maybe, I don't know. So when you look down at the minors for minor league depth for bullpen, you're like, I don't know. It's kind of scary out there with that. And so,
well, I could see. We've always kind of been a little bit low on Kyle Funkhouser. As he never seemed to throw enough strikes, or at least not have good command. But he showed some flashes last year. He was throwing like a 97-mile-an-hour sinker, and his slider looked good. I could see him suddenly coming out of nowhere and being a decent option. It's these bullpen roles are so up and down. You never know who can come out.
Kind of on that note, one guy that I think is kind of interesting that I want to take another look at too is Alex Lange. Came over in the Castellanos trade from the Cubs, I believe, with Paul Recan. And he came over as a starter, kind of struggled, didn't have a great velocity, but Tigers moved into the bullpen after that trade, and his velocity kind of took off. I mean, he was hitting 96, 97, top 98 in spring training last year with, what seemed to me like an inconsistent but, promising slider at Flash Plus to me at times. And so if he can, bring in some consistency, I think that there's an arm there that's at least interesting. So he's one not to forget about too.
Yeah, the Tigers took him on their 40-man over Will Vest, who we know is a top 100 prospect.
And I think I'm curious too how AJ Hinch and staff are going to handle Joe Jimenez. He was a guy that obviously struggled in high leverage last year, really for the better part of the last 2 or 3 years, aside from his all-star bid in 2018.
I forgot about that.
Whether it was deserved or not is a different conversation. But I think that I want to see him used in a situation where there's 2 outs in an inning, there's a right-handed power hitter up, and maybe there's guys on base, and Hinch throws him out there and says, just get this guy out. And I think we saw that towards the end of the season last year after Gardenhire had removed him from the closer role. I think there was one at bat in particular that I remember, and it was we were playing the Twins. It was maybe a 3-2 game, and he came in with the bases loaded facing Nelson Cruz, and he threw him 3 straight sliders down and away, struck him out on 3 pitches, and that stuck out to me because one, his slider isn't that bad. His slider is actually a pretty positive pitch in short spurts, and 2, his velocity was down last year. And I think if he's able to come in those high leverage situations where he's facing, obviously he can't guarantee to be facing one hitter at a time, but if he's coming in with 2 outs, facing one guy, say just get this guy out, he can just bring it all out there for one guy at a time. Pitch those fastballs at 98 up in the zone with the slider down and away, and I think he would have success in that role. So that's kind of how I want to see him used this year. It'll be interesting to see what Hinch does in that with him.
I try to keep myself from thinking Chris Fetter is going to be a miracle worker, the magic pitch fairy or something like that. But with Joe Jimenez is another one of those guys who does have some of the underlying characteristics that should work. He's another guy with a really high spin fastball. He's going to lead attention, where he's releasing the ball 55 feet from the plate or whatever. I guess even closer than that. My math is bad. But so I feel like he's a guy that Fetter could do some good things with, and he could eventually reclaim that role. We've seen him work in that role before, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. It'll probably fluctuate quite a bit this year, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to the Chris Fetter effect too, where how these guys are going to get better, and maybe we mentioned with Kyle Funkhouser that could be the case, and he could just harness his best pitches. So. Let's get to the questions. There's about 4 or 5 questions that came in, and I'll start with the first one. Who will stay on pace from last year? Candelario or Willie? Well, no, Victor Reyes. Sorry, it was Victor Reyes. I was looking at that for a second. That was Willie Castro, but Candelario or Victor Reyes? Well, Joe, that's kind of a tough question because the jury's still on Victor Reyes. But, No one. I can tell you this much. I can ask. It's like you asking somebody for what they want on pizza. They're going to tell you 6 different people are going to tell you 6 different things about Victor Reyes. And I know John Uper is going to have a different opinion, but I'll start because he's the new guy. Joe, go ahead with this one. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this.
All right. Well, first off, I am far more confident that Candelario, I think, can repeat what he did last year than I am out of Victor Reyes. I think what Candelario is able to do, I think kind of getting back to some of the things earlier in his career that gave, that a lot of people a little bit more, I think those are things that generally translate better. I'm not as confident that Victor Reyes, that we're going to see Victor Reyes, replicate some of the things that he's did. But I mean, I say that I think Reyes has like a 21% strikeout rate since he's been in the majors. I think some people tend to think that he's, kind of a flailer up there, but he has actually had some ability to make contact. But if you ask me, pick one, I'd go with Candelario.
All right.
Reyes was objectively a below average hitter last year. So, he had a 90, I believe a 92 OPS plus. So, if he repeats that, that's maybe a 4th outfielder, right? So, I mean, I could see that happening again, right? So, even if he repeats his 2020 at, as a half a WAR player in 2020, I think that's doable for him, but it's not going to get the Tigers a starter caliber player necessarily. But I mean, regarding Candelario, I think a lot of the signs are there that he can at least be an above average hitter. Whether he's able to put together that hot streak like he did at the end of last year again remains to be seen. But I mean, he has the hard hit rate, the walk rate, the ability to avoid strikeouts. All the ingredients are there for him to be an above average hitter.
What about you, Jake?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. A lot of the same points. I'm with Candelario being able to maintain his pace. I think it just kind of finally came together because this is kind of what we expected of Candelario when we acquired him, right? And then it was there for a second, and then it was gone, and you thought, okay, when do you pull the plug on this thing? And then all of a sudden he turns it around, and this is kind of what we thought Candelario could be. He probably hits 270. He might hit 20 home runs, something like that, and take some walks. And you take that 7 days a week and twice on Sunday kind of thing. So I would say Candelario is probably the guy. And the other thing to talk about, too, is Victor Reyes is probably going to be pushed out of plate appearances, right? We've signed Robbie Grossman and we've signed Nomar Mazara. So he's not going to have the type of impact. He can't because he's not going to have enough plate appearances to do so.
The thing about Victor Reyes is that even when I was looking at some of the percentages against what he was doing against secondary pitches last year, it's still not an improvement. He's a fourth outfielder at best, and that's it. There's in the story. And Candelario, to me, I thought I put Candelario is going to have multiple or double-digit home runs, and I put my money where my mouth was last year because I thought at some point he's going to, based off his work ethic and based off his fielding, that he was going to put it together, and he did. But as far as Victor Reyes is concerned, he's a good positional player. If you're gonna put him out every other day or just like a good sub,
can we just say that a fourth outfielder is an awesome outcome for a Rule 5 draft pick?
Yes,
I mean
yes,
that is an amazing outcome. You got him for nothing. So the fact that you picked up a fourth outfielder, somebody that can contribute to your major league team for nothing out of the Rule 5 draft, that's a win. That's a W.
Yeah, better than, if you look at most Rule 5 fates, it's not, outside of Johan Santana, but that's like what, once in every full blue moon that happens? Or am I missing somebody?
No, he was yeah, you're right. That was also in the old rules where they've added a year of sides since then. So yeah, the best Rule 5 picks in the last 15 years or so are guys like Ugla.
And they changed the rules for eligibility. They kind of narrowed the draft quite a bit. Difference.
Brad Keller has been one of the best. He was the same Rule 5 draft as Reyes. But no, my point was Kellen's. I think the premise of the question is a little bit off because Reyes wasn't very good last year. He had like a really nice 3-week stretch where it was kind of like he was doing everything. He was doing home runs, stealing bases, or hitting. But I just feel like that's more likely to get than Candelario, who was on like a 4-WAR pace last year, which I think he was awesome for 2 straight months. I'm not sure. I feel like over the course of the full season, he's going to have a number 2 and be more of a 2.5, 3.5 win player.
Piece worth mentioning on Candelario too is that assuming he goes back to third base, which I'm begging that he goes back to third base.
Yeah.
I think that he'll add value there as well, and certainly more than he did at first base. So that's another piece here to consider that makes him even more valuable.
Yep. And I think he might need to see some value there because I think the last time I saw he had like a 390-ish batting average on balls in play last year. So obviously that average is going to come down, I think, more in line to what Jake's expectations are in that 270 range. So that'll knock the offensive production down just a little bit.
Even if he's an average hitter at third base and he's providing above average defense, I think that's certainly reasonable. And obviously the Tigers will take that any day.
Yeah, absolutely.
If Candelario is kind of your leading hitter of your second tier in your lineup, that's a really quality player. As you project this out forward, you got to hope that Green and Torkelson are the guys who are going to lead your contending lineup, plus somebody else that they might bring in free agency. And then that next tier, if Candelario is your best guy, he has a chance to be that kind of guy who helps turn that lineup over and be a good player that way. I was very impressed with what he showed, especially from the left side of the plate last year. He was hitting the ball really hard, very consistent for a long stretch. Now, it was a short season. Can he do it for 162? We'll see, but he certainly gave us plenty to look forward to. We need things to look forward to on this team, and I think that's one of them. Vic Reyes is kind of my little pet project, only because I had some friends who hated him when he was a Rule 5 guy and he was like 1 for 30 or whatever he was. So I became the Vic Reyes cheerleader just to kind of spite them. And I've kind of stuck with that. I think the guy, Chris took, it was amazing. It's like you're reading my mind. I was saying the exact same thing. For a Rule 5 guy, he has worked out well. He's a fourth outfielder, can play some positions. He's gotten better in the field. He's not running into people and
I forgot about that. He was
shortstop and that kind of thing. That is stopped. So, he's another one. I think he looks much better as a left-hand hitter. I would just ditch the switch hitting and platoon him. But Jake's point is great. They brought in a couple left-hand bats. So there's only going to be so many at-bats to go around. I think Water finds his level, and I think Reyes will find his on the bench, chipping in with some pinch running, and if you start a couple starts a week, and that's fine.
Yeah, there's so much more you can ask for, and for what kind of value you're getting. So let's move on to who will have more wins, Fulmer or Norris.
How about who pitches more innings?
Wait, can the Tigers get wins? Is that allowed?
In terms of even from a standpoint of what's more important, innings thrown. In this case, I think innings thrown.
I definitely think it's innings. That's why I wrote that piece about. I still think they should sign 2 starters because I think they're going to need the innings. They have so many guys who can get through the lineup. If getting through the lineup twice is going to be a challenge for a lot of guys. So I would go with innings, and there's just no telling with Fulmer. You'd like to think that there's something left from his Rookie of the Year, his All-Star season, but man, come up with some examples of guys who looked like he did last year after the surgery and who've fallen from such a high level and then have come back. You can probably find some guys, but that's going to be a short list. It looked bad. I'm tempted to go with Norris, even if he's out of the bullpen, getting through a lineup once, getting 2 1/3 or 3 innings that way. I hope I'm wrong. They'd be much better off as an organization if Fulmer reassumes that mantle, but I'm not putting any of my own money on it, that's for sure.
I noticed we just got a comment from John Ziegler. I was about to say the exact same thing here, that Fulmer has to pitch more than 3 innings as a starter to get a win. I was about to say I can't see Fulmer lasting through the 5th much, if at all. So I don't think he's going to be picking up many wins unless he's coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah, that's a good point there as well.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 outcomes for Fulmer, right? He's either this opener kind of thing that he did in 2020 where you just kind of get him out there and see what happens kind of thing and roll with the punches. And in that case, he's probably only pitching 2 or 3 innings. Or if he's just not the same guy, then your last resort is to go to a reliever, right? In which case he's probably not working high leverage relief anyway. So I kind of like Norris in a multiple inning role, and he could potentially find some leverage spots to work in to where he could find some wins as well. It's such an inexact science, the whole win anyway, but that would be my pick if I had to.
I think I'd agree with you guys. I think Norris is the guy I would lean towards. I just think he's had more recent success. He was actually pretty good he was actually pretty good last year in a limited number of innings, 25, 30 innings. I think his FIP was actually even better than his ERA. So, peripherals seem to indicate maybe he pitched better than it even looked like on the surface. So, I think Norris will pitch better and have more opportunities to get wins.
Yeah,
Norris will probably be the guy who's most tradable to deadline if he shows that if he duplicates what he was doing last year.
Yeah,
I think Norris is the better pitcher at this point. So
yeah, I think you're right, Chris. Yeah.
That's just the kind of the way. And what sucks is, with most guys come back from Tommy John surgery and look okay. At least they get their velocity back and they're able to be some semblance of what they used to be. It kind of goes down the older you get, but every now and then there's a guy who just it doesn't come back, but those guys kind of split into camps. Sometimes they're the guys who just never get their velocity back. Like I think of there was a top prospect for the Royals named John Lamb, who was part of the group that was supposed to help turn the Royals around, and they ended up trading him to Reds for Johnny Cueto. He just never ever got his velocity back after Tommy John surgery. And then the other camp is like Matt Harvey, who was one of the best pitchers in baseball, and had the Tommy John surgery, and he still throws hard. It just doesn't work anymore. I don't know what happened, and I feel like that might be where Fulmer is going to go, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's in that Kyle. He's going to be in that Kyle Sleeth.
Oh no!
No. That's a name that didn't even make it. They didn't even do anything.
Had that Tommy John surgery, and he was toast.
Yeah, but it's usually the second year from coming back from Tommy John where you notice the difference. So we'll see. If he was losing velocity last year, that's concerned me a little bit. But
can you guys imagine how much more fun this top 20 list would have been put together if the Tigers front office would have maximized the trade value for Fulmer and Boyd when they had the opportunity? This would have been amazing. We would have had 10 top 100 prospects.
You're about to get us all angry here.
Yes.
Oh, they'd be on the MLB club. We'd have Baez or whatever the report was.
That's right.
Gleyber Torres.
Okay, who's going to be a regular first? Riley Green or Spencer Torkelson?
Ooh.
I think I got to go with Torkelson. Just coming out as a college bat, obviously older, significantly older. I think that he definitely has a chance to be a regular by the end of this season, where I don't think we'll see Green probably until 2022 would be my guess.
I'll say Torkelson too, but I just wrote him up. You look back, I follow a fair amount of college baseball. Torkelson has been hitting at a high level ever since he was a freshman. So if you kind of, you look at his age right now, if he had been an A-ball, would he have been hitting or a rookie ball and then A-ball at a young age? I think he would have been. He's been a very advanced bat. He went on the Cape Cod League with wood bats, had good bat control, and showed his offensive game there. He's never had a setback offensively. I am looking this year. How does when he faces pro pitching on a daily basis, he's going to have some struggles. How he bounces back from that will be very interesting to see. My guess is he will bounce back when that time comes. So I think he'll be in the majors in relatively short order. Maybe this September, but I think by assuming we have an opening day in 22 with no strike or lockout, I think he's there pretty fast in 22.
I wonder if the defensive position. I would tend to agree. I think Torkelson's bat just is probably a little bit more polished. When you hear scouts and analysts throw around terms like he's the most polished bat since Mark Teixeira or something like that, that generally tells me somebody's going to move pretty quickly. But does the defensive position come into play here? I think Green has obviously played out. Has been an outfielder. If the bat's as good as we think, he might still move pretty quickly. Maybe it takes Torkelson a little time to adjust to third base. If he was at first base, I definitely think it would be Torkelson though.
Well, I'm gonna go with. You know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna stick with my guns here. I'm gonna go with Riley Green.
Do it.
I'm just gonna, I'm gonna be contrarian here, but I think I have some merit behind it, only because I haven't seen Spencer Torkelson play.
Yeah.
I just can't. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry. Like, I've seen the bats and all the hype, but I'm just trying to see through all the hype and just see. I like this. I've seen Riley Green play. When I see Spencer Torkelson, then I can make a better comparison, but I can't do it. So.
But you have him on the Juan Soto timeline.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
yeah, that's fine.
So
sign me up for that outcome right now.
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah,
I love that outcome.
Yeah.
So there are two things I envision happening, and we've talked about this before. I feel like the Tigers really got some good mileage out of calling up Skubal, Mize, and Paredes all at the same time last year. And I've joked about them doing the same sort of thing with Green and Torkelson, like bam, today's prospect Christmas. Here you go. Both these guys called up on the same day. But then it's just higher in the lineup, which would probably be But the one thing I thought we heard already this winter, I don't know if it was Al Avila or AJ Hinch, they were talking about Green possibly starting in Double-A Erie this year. and Torkelson likely being in West Michigan, which would make it, high A West Michigan now, make it slightly more likely for Green. But I imagine Torkelson will catch up to him pretty quickly. So I think it's most likely Torkelson, but it wouldn't shock me if it's the same day or if it's Green. They're both very good.
Yeah, Torkelson was going to be my pick for the record. So it was very boring. So I'm kind of glad that Roger stepped in and gave Green. That way we have a little bit of balance there. But yeah, for Torkelson, it's a lot of the same things. I think it's going to come down to positional need. And they've even referenced as an organization, like, hey, Miguel Cabrera came up as a left fielder because that's what the Marlins needed at the time. I think it's going to be a similar thing where they're trying to make Torkelson work at third, but ultimately, like, there's a gaping hole at first base. And I think that ultimately he's going to end up there, and that's where he's going to be called up to play.
Here's a very unfun topic on this. And I alluded to it a little while ago. With the collective bargaining agreement ending and so much uncertainty and it could get so ugly, are they better off waiting until they know what system they're playing under starting in 22 once they do get an agreement? I mean, is it worth their time to even put them in the majors at any point this year for sure? And, then they have to wait until after the agreement is hammered out, whenever that is. I mean, that might eliminate all those guys, even Manning this year.
No, that's what I think. I would put it either of them coming up this year at like a 0.5%. I think you're right. I think they're not going to do anything with their service time until they understand what's going to happen next year. Yes. The flip side of that is that maybe they'll get wind of some potential where, like, hey, if you get a guy in, like, start their service clock before the next CBA, then you still get 6+ years of control, and in the next CBA you only get 5 or whatever. So they might want to force it, but I just, unless the Tigers are unexpectedly competing or 500 in July or something, I don't see them pushing either of these guys up this year.
Yeah, the Tigers should, unless there's some sort of catastrophic incident with some of the players that are positional players, there's no need to. I just want, for me, the biggest goal is to see what the last 2 draft classes will be like, and that to me was to show the kind of progress of the farm system. That I'm looking forward to, and that's what I really want. In terms of, and that kind of leads to the next question: who is the most underrated or undervalued prospect in the organization? It's a loaded question, but let's take a first crack.
I will. I don't know if anybody's tired of hearing me talk. I mean, you could look at our spreadsheet to see, but my answer to this is always basically Joey Wentz, which is, it's a little bit iffy now that he had Tommy John surgery, but he sounds like he's making progress. I feel like he kind of gets left out because he doesn't have the ceiling of the other 3 top 2 prospects. But I think he's got the same floor, basically. I think there's a really good shot that Joey Wentz becomes a number 4 or number 5 starter. He's got the same sort of arm angle, and I don't know about his spin, but he's got some of the same traits that Kubel does as a lefty. He's pretty athletic. I don't know who wrote up his blurb for us, but they noticed that he hit a 540-foot home run or whatever in the high school home run derby. He was a big-time power hitting first baseman. And he's got a really good changeup, and he's got playable breaking balls. I just think he's got a really good chance to be a back end starter, and I think that's a lot more valuable than we tend to realize.
I learned a ton about Wentz from doing that write up, and he actually, it's funny you mentioned that home run. Yeah, he won the junior home run derby at the MLB All-Star game as a junior in high school, I believe. Hit a 535-foot home run. And Fangraphs at one point had him as 70 raw power as a hitter. Yeah. And that was just crazy to me. So he was focusing on pitching still, but he could have been a hitting prospect as well, which speaks to how good of an athlete he is. And I was always under the impression, just from watching him and from what I've read about him after the trade, the Shane Green trade, that he was, like you said, kind of a number 5 starter without much upside besides that. But in doing some more research and going a little deeper there, I mean, he has he's had some inconsistency in his fastball velocity, but when he's on, I mean, he can get up to 95. He has 2 at least average off-speed pitches. He has good vertical movement on the fastball. I think he was actually on the Fangraphs picks to click from last year. And so obviously the Tommy John is a setback, but I think when he comes back, I mean, if he's able to maintain consistency in his fastball velocity up to, 93 to 95, like we had seen at times, I mean, I don't see any reason why he can't be a number 3 starter. And I think that was abundantly clear to me when I was writing that up, and I really didn't know that before. So I'll kind of echo your sentiment there on underrated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people saw Matthew Boyd as being like a number 3 or number 4 starter, and it's not exactly identical profile, but they're close enough. Big tall lefties, some 3 usable pitches, and I assume we will see Wentz this year, probably in August or September. So look forward to that.
As far as underrated prospect in the organization, I thought about this question all day, and I went back and forth in my head. And this is something that you guys probably may come as a surprise, may not. I don't know, but that's Jake Rogers. You know why? I think he's undervalued. And we saw some of the progress he was making last year in Lakeland. Saw the power, we saw the swing changes, the mechanics, and somehow that got buried. And look, I know what Chris is going to tell me. Well, Roger, remember last year when they didn't call him up during the 60-man and they called up Eric Haas? Yes.
I would never.
You got to factor in the fact that the organization hates him. Come on.
Yeah, no, and maybe that's what it is. And just even David Littlefield, the master gateman down there in Toledo, was like, no. I don't know. And I also think about what I'm trying to think of Doug Mikhevich said too, and so I don't know. I think Jake Rogers is undervalued and underappreciated, and I think that if he comes out swinging this spring, then great. Then I'll be proven right. But if he comes out and does what he did before, but I just think right now as an organization, he was doing stuff last year, and the Tigers again. I don't know what was going on down there, and we'll never know what happened in summer camp because it was guarded like fortress of solitude. No one knew what was going on in there. So, but was it Drew Carlton? Was that a Drew Carlton comment there? Wow.
Yeah, John Ziegler. Yeah, so that's interesting because I dug into Drew Carlton when I was doing the TMLR tools last year or whatever. Yeah, and he's kind of a poor man's John Schreiber, if you will. There's a little bit of
too soon, Chris. Too soon.
Yeah. There's a little bit of kind of side-armed, a little deception. I think he gets his front shoulder toward the batter so that it hides the ball well. And he's got his fastball has some life to it, even though it's only like 90-92. The breaking ball's okay, but yeah, it's not. I don't know. He's a guy. I remember seeing him in spring training, I think, and he just got absolutely rocked. And it's just 1 or 2 outings, but I think he's just a little bit short of being a legitimate prospect. But you never know. We've talked ad nauseum about these relievers coming out of nowhere, so he's at least a name to know in the system. I don't think he's necessarily, gonna turn into a prospect.
Yeah, when I think undervalue, I wonder if we've I mean, he's a former first round pick, so maybe we've soured on Derek Hill a little bit too much as a prospect community. I mean, he's a guy who obviously is super fast. I think Fangraphs has him as a 65 or 70 speed wise. I mean, has a potential to play plus defense in center field. I mean, now the difference between being a Rule 5 pick and a first round pick is pretty significant from an expectation standpoint. But I mean, a 4th outfielder out of a guy who's, back into the top 30, I'm guessing on most prospect lists. I mean, that'd be a pretty solid outcome for somebody. And Hill seems to have some tools. I mean, he's hit well at some points in the minors. I mean, he's controlled the strike zone at some points in the minors. I mean, he's a guy who I think, there's still an outside chance that he can impact a big league roster.
We've talked before about how Derek Hill is one of those strange players who might not fit on a rebuilding team like the Tigers, but might be a great fit for like a championship level team where they just need where they need one outfielder who can just go get the ball and run really fast, and a guy who can help steal your bases. Whereas the Tigers maybe can't afford to do that or can't afford to give them the chance to get any better. But that's a good too, and I think any of these former first round picks, Bo Burrows comes to mind.
Yeah.
That, again, who knows? He's a guy who's got some favorable fastball traits. He just kind of doesn't look all that great anymore.
All right. And then,
Like,
go ahead.
I think it was my first ever write up for MCB actually was on Derek Hill, and I thought for a while he was underrated as well, and I kind of wanted to explore, like, is there a path for him to get to the major league as an actual everyday center fielder? And I guess really what it comes down to is there's not really many players who have made it to the major leagues and like had success with his tool set, just with his his terrible hit tool, basically, is what it really comes down to.
Wait, come on, you have to hit now? Come on.
Yeah, and I mean he's if he could bring his power to above average, then maybe he could be like a Keon Broxton type, where he was around for a few years, but right now he's really looking pretty much like a poor man's like Adam Engel. And I was always happy when Adam Engel was up to the plate when we were playing the White Sox. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, the swing, it doesn't look good. I think, not to get too far off topic, but but I think that somebody like Parker Meadows is another guy who, it's a little bit early to say this, but he's also a guy who looks like he might not hit. And it's always weird to me. I just feel like he's a guy. He's got a mechanical issue with he's got a hitting swing, and it's we think of these athletes as these guys who should be able to alter their approach and do things differently, and some of them can, but other guys, even these top-notch athletes, changing your muscle memory is really hard. I like to think about, like, if a doctor told you that, like, suddenly you just had to walk like this, like whatever, hey, you got to do that. We could do it for a little bit, but eventually we go back to the way we've been walking our entire life. I feel like that's the way with these guys swinging, and then also the mental aspect of it. Like you get drafted as a hitter, and the team's like, hey, we love you, except you can't hit. So change the way you hit. And it's like, in my head, that's I would think that would really mess you up as a person. Like it's almost like if you were a model and you got hired by a modeling agency. They're like, yeah, you're great. You just got to change your face.
We always put this really fun spin on it, like we're rebuilding their swing, which makes it sound like this real positive. But yeah, I think you're right, Chris. I think it's got to be incredibly difficult.
I mean, some guys do it. Some guys do it in the course of an off season, and it's great. Not everybody can.
As far as it's Derek Hill's dad too. I mean, don't piss off Derek Hill's dad, because there was talk about when he was changing his swing for power, and people were trying to dog on Derek Hill's. Derek Hill's dad came on Twitter. I think, was it Twitter or social? I forgot where he was, but he was just like, "Look, he's working on some things. Step off." And it was the guy who used to play in the major league, so he knows something or two. But did
everybody get to do an underrated one?
Yeah. Did I miss somebody? I'm sorry.
Both of mine were taken already, so I
sorry. Okay,
which is fine. I had Jake Rogers teed up, and then I was going to go with Wentz. So we're good. You guys
can go first. You can go first and overrated if you want.
Yeah, go for it, John.
Well, overrated. I mean, I was thinking Daz Cameron and Parker Meadows. I mean, they're kind of ranked very close in our rankings. Daz Cameron's still lingering on. I think we have him 10th. I believe it was 10th. Whatever. If Daz Cameron's father was an electrician and wasn't an ex-major league player, I mean, would we still have him where we have him? I think some of that plays into it. He came last year. I liked, obviously, a fine defender. He had a couple opposite field line drives that I thought, that was kind of fun to see. But proof's in the pudding. Other than that one big stretch he had in his last months with the Astros organization, it just hasn't been there. So, he's kind of looking like he's going to be in that fourth outfielder bin as well. I'm not sure I see a starter coming at any point. Meadows, as Chris just mentioned, is he going to hit? Kind of is getting to be that time where he at least needs to show a pulse on a regular basis. So I would say those are kind of my two guys. I would love to see them both take a step forward this year. It'd be huge for the organization. But if I picked one that will take that step, I'll go with Meadows, only because he's lower in the system and he still has a little bit of time on his side to hopefully flourish.
What about you? I'll go with you, Joe.
Guys, the guy that I've been struggling with, lately is, and I've been trying to, like find anything you can. And Raj, I think you hit on it. You talked about him a little bit earlier. We haven't seen Campos since he was 14 years old, play baseball. And, I think, Rogelio, you and Chris, I think even on the last podcast, we're talking about, or one of the recent podcasts, we're just talking about, I think with Kevin, just to like how hard it has to be to evaluate a prospect, at that age and project a 8 to 10 years down the road when they get to the big leagues. So I just wonder if the complete unknown of what Campos is and who he is. I mean, he looks like he's right. I guess he looks like he's a, big, strong, athletic guy. He seems kind of, I think maybe even fairly valued.
So does Steven Moya. Remember that.
yeah. Like, the guy had a cannon from from right. Yeah. So I that's one of those things that I struggle with him a little bit, just because I mean, there's really zero track record, for us to, to point to and really say, hey, this is where we're planting our flag. This is why we think he can be a big leaguer.
Yeah. Jake, what about you?
For me, it's Wenzel Perez. And maybe a decade ago or something like that, if he's coming up, maybe he's like a top 10 prospect, because you could have gotten by at shortstop with playing great defense and just kind of, getting by with the bat. But he's somebody who struggled quite a bit too. And we've seen this time and time again, whether it be Dixon Machado or Sergio Alcantara, like, it's not enough just to play defense. You got to do something else on the ball field to last and to make it as a regular. So the bat has a lot to do in order to find any type of regular role in an MLB roster. So for me, it's Perez. I think people are just kind of hanging on and dying on that hill.
That's a really good one. Kellen, what about you?
I'll go a little off the mainstream here. I saw something back on MLB.com back a couple months ago that said that Gage Workman was on the minor league Gold Glove team at third base. And I took a look at it and I was like, dude hasn't played an inning in the minor leagues. And I mean, I think he played some shortstop in college, and he's supposed to be a good glove at third base. But I mean, let's like pump the brakes a little bit there. I mean, obviously he's got some tools and quick feet, strong arm, big body at third base. But I think that was just something that stuck out to me. Like, I don't think we know what he's going to look like on defense yet. So let's just calm down a little bit there. But I'm also cracking up at John's comment here, Cam Gibson. That kind of triggers me a little bit, because I remember watching him as a 26-year-old in Double-A getting at bats over our actual prospects there in left field. So that one hits home, John. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that was a good one, John. As far as Jake, you mentioned Wenzel Perez. I mean, I've seen the kind of the regression a little bit. We saw him the first time we saw him. He looked really good. He was barreling up the ball right, and then he looked like he was skinny, and then he gained a little weight. It was kind of like, remember, Chris, you were talking about his big thighs. He looked like and then he just couldn't square up the ball like he was before. And I will say this. I know there's some people out there who are big on him, or still big on him, and I'm kind of rather miffed about it. Sam McMillan. There's some, and I'm saying that it's not like he doesn't come up in prospect circles or anything, but among Tiger prospect circles, he's still talked about a little bit. But
I thought he was in the witness protection program somewhere.
Oh, he's in there. Is he in there with Jose King? Because I mean, I would like to go get them too as well. But it's just one of those things where I've never understood the hype behind Sam McMillan. And every time we saw that he could get on base, but could he square up and hit a ball? No. So no knock on
that guy in Double-A or Single-A that had the on base percentage that was higher than the slugging.
Yeah.
Oh, who is that?
Oh man, I'm trying to blank out.
Yeah. No, I think high school catchers often take like a decade to get the big, but still, yeah, I don't know if there's anything there. I don't think any of us like love talking about overrated players. We don't want to be mean to these guys. and I kind of, mine are just kind of relative to the sort of love that we see on Twitter and Tigers Twitter. I feel like Bryant Packard and Jose De La Cruz are a little bit overrated. And this is just like I said, from the Tigers prospect fans. I think, and I mentioned it earlier, but Packard is kind of a little bit like Torkelson, where a lot of it has to do with the position. You have to hit a ton to be valuable playing first base. And I really like Bryant Packard. He interviewed us, or we interviewed him. He was a super nice kid, really personable. Looks like he's working harder than hell. He's lost a bunch of weight. I wouldn't put it past him at all. I think he's probably got a big league cut. I just don't know if he's going to hit for the power that you need to really be anything more than like a bench bat at the big league level. And that's still pretty damn good for a 5th round. I feel like there are people now who think that, like, he might be the starting first base of the future. I think that's just much to ask from him.
Chris, I'm curious about your thoughts moving Packard to first base. I mean, why was that needed right now? I mean, he's getting in better shape. He seems like he's getting some speed back. I mean, did they really need to move him off left field right now? Like, why would they do that?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe that's indicative that they think he has more power than I do. I think he's probably average, maybe above average power, for like 15, 20 home runs. Maybe they think he's got more juice in there. I don't know. Maybe it's just a versatility thing. They want him, but he's played some first base in the past too. So I think he played first base with USA. But maybe it's just a thing like, left field, first base, get him playing everywhere. But yeah, it did seem like kind of inopportune timing to see him. He's cut all this weight and looks svelte and like, yeah, we're just gonna have you stand there at first base. Like, oh, all right.
And it's like, it's like if the power is there, then that's even better for left field. I mean,
yeah. I mean, we talked before the first base within the system is kind of a wasteland. They don't have. I mean, you're talking now Torkelson, and that's it. Until with Packard, they had the ghost of Rivera, but so I don't know. Maybe it's the organizational need, but I don't. Hopefully, he can still play some outfield. But like I said, the people love him because he can hit, and that's good because the Tigers didn't have hitting prospects forever. I just don't know if it's going to be enough for him to be, really a great major leaguer. And with De La Cruz, this is sort of along the lines of Campos stuff. He at least had a season in the Dominican Summer League. Yeah. But when we're talking about kids like that who miss a whole year of development because of the pandemic, it's really hard for somebody like that, like it's 18-year-old Dominican kid. He's going to be coming to play in the Gulf Coast League this year, I think. And he strikes me as the sort of profile. He's just a cool goof, which I love. I love guys. He's got power. He's got speed. He's got an arm. He might play center field. But he's a guy I could see running a 40% strikeout rate with like a 5% walk rate in the future. I've compared him to Wilkin Ramirez a bunch, who used to, I don't know if Tigers fans have
yeah.
Wow, that's a name.
Wilkin Ramirez had a couple 2020 seasons, I think, in AAA. He just couldn't quite hit. And that's just sort of what I worry about with someone like De La Cruz. I'm excited about the tools. I just think, and I think I have him 16th or 17th on our list, so I'm as guilty of this as anybody. But I just feel like we're all a little bit overheated on guys like that. Those are mine.
All right. Yeah, that's a good summary of everything, and I know that even Joey Morgan too should be under the witness protection program too. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. That's a
3rd round pick, was he?
That 3rd round draft pick. Yeah. That's the ill-fated 2017 draft class. That's still.
That was a rough one.
Yeah,
that was the two catchers because McMillan was taken in the 5th round in that draft.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
they got Fido, Rivera, Morgan. Who came before? Arriera?
Was Cooper Johnson in that draft as well? I think.
Cooper Johnson was the 2019. I thought it was 2019, right? Or
I think he was.
He was a 6th round. Yeah. I think he was 6th round.
Yeah, 2019. Yeah.
That was the 2019. That was Quintana, Lipschitz, Kreidler.
Gotcha.
Johnson, Hess, Bergner. Who else did we get there? Or Packard. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's. I'm trying to think of like that other. I feel like they're missing is that it though? There's nobody else in the system in the 2017 draft, is there?
Did somebody say Gio Aria or Area? Did they mention
Area? I think
Did he retire? I thought he retired.
I don't think so. I think they still believe in him a little bit. He's got a decent curveball, but
was Cole Peterson the 2017 draft?
I think so.
Oh, Drew Carlton was in that draft too. Drew Carlton.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Drew Carlton, and then another. You know who's still in the system for that draft from the 17th round? Billy Leshner.
Oh, all right.
I totally forgot.
Yeah,
I forgot he existed.
That might, unfortunately, that might not.
Oh, got Max Green too. Max
Oh
Green.
yeah, Max
There you
Green.
go.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, Max Green might work out. It's a big favor among some prospect circles. So, all right, thanks so much for listening to the MCB Roundtable. You can find us over at Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts, and find the episode. We'll be posting it probably sometime tomorrow afternoon or early Saturday, depends on production wise. I don't really have to do much editing, so. And you can find it on a YouTube channel, Tiger Money Report, and some news coming up about a podcast, but we'll keep that on wraps for now. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it, and look forward to talking some baseball soon. And just glad baseball's back.
Yeah.
And there's word that all the spring training games were sold out. So if you're heading down there, it's going to be at 20% capacity. So
Start scalping those spring training tickets.
yeah.
File
So
that under words you never thought you'd say.
there are people like lining up at Joker Market Stadium, like, you got any of those tickets, man?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got him?
I want to. Yeah, we need to. Yeah, we already got the minor league schedule all carved up. So, but until next time, we'll see you next time.
Get the peanut butter ticket sandwich.
Peanut butter crack sandwich. Oh man, it's all right. That was good. That was a little longer than I thought it was going to be, but still pretty good. So, Cal, nice work. Everybody, nice job.
Yeah, great job, guys.
Yeah, it was fun.
That was good. Hey, it was good meeting you guys all.
Yeah.
Even if it's through a computer.
You know what? I just realized that. Yeah, this is the first time I've ever. You know what's funny too is I never even. I still haven't met Chip yet. I'm going to actually meet James Shipman for the first time this summer. 2 years now, and I've never met the guy. So, all right, gentlemen. Well, I'm gonna put this to bed, and thanks again. And what was I gonna say? I feel like I'm missing something. I'm good. But
Sure.
all right, guys.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.
You know.
What? Hi. Hi.
How are you? Today on recording.
He's having some sort of Alzheimer's episode. He can't remember anything.
Who?
Keith. Oh.